Thank you, BAMM, for inviting me back again. It's always a pleasure and an honour to come and give a talk here among so many Mosaic friends. I'm actually giving a talk called The People's History. The Revolution will be ceramicised. And so I'm going to be talking about print, and print on clay, and print on tile. I've always loved print. I've spent 8 years at adult college. Linda was my original tutor, who's here, learning how to transfer image onto ceramic. I love it because you can play around with plates, as I've done here. You know, taking old vintage plates, adding something, subverting it. It's a passion of mine. Doesn't all have to be political. Some of it is funny. This is a Louise Bourgeois quote and a favourite of mine. Some of you who've been to my other talks will know that I have been to hell and back. Obviously, I also like to play around with royalty. In fact, I like to play around and subvert most things. And I am known as a craftivist, but I'm beginning to think that I'm more of a craft archivist, because now the nature of my work in public art is that I'm often asked to reflect history, which is something that I'm passionate about. Here's another example of my work. This is a ceramic slip cast spray can. Another one. And so obviously, as well as putting print onto tile, I also, onto ceramic objects, I print onto tile. And my own personal private work is often like this. It's quite subversive. You can see the devil is in the detail. What you can't see is that the close-up on these pink tiles actually has hardcore Victorian porn and pages from the Bible in it. So really, you have to see my work close up. You have to be able to look at all the detail. But that's something I love about what I do, is that as well as mosaicing, I can print and do multi-layers and add multi-meanings to my work. One of the main public art pieces I did where I really used this was 2010. I produced this piece, which is Mary Bamber, a revolutionary woman. She was a suffragette that not many people had ever heard of, and I created this monument. And around it, you can see I printed a plaque that gave you the names and the deeds of every known suffragette in the whole of Merseyside. This piece was only made for a 6-week project. It was supposed to be outside. It was Liverpool Discoveries, where you could walk around Liverpool and discover hidden histories. But thankfully, they liked the piece so much that they bought it and they put it inside the Museum of Liverpool. And I'd like to think that, you know, I was helped to make sure that women and women's suffrage got to be a large piece inside that museum and gave it a voice. Most recently, I mean, this is last year, but this is South Acton's Tree of Life. This was a year in the making. It was made by myself and the Treatment Rooms Collective. And from a distance, you can see it's just a beautiful tree, an oak tree that was deliberately, because Acton means oak town. And it used to just be forests of oak trees. But when you get close up to it, I've printed in the background of that the historical history, the community history, and the cultural history. And it's very layered, as you can see. Like this one cross actually tells you all about the Second World War. It's got all the bombs. You can see that it's very layered. It's, you know, you could spend ages just going up to this piece. I designed it in a way so that school children would be able to be led to this piece. They could walk along it and they would have the entire history, especially when you think that this is a regeneration, gentrification of an area. They're knocking down a huge estate. They're building it, and I wanted it to have a very permanent record of what had gone before. But how did it start? I wanted to really go back and show you like one project or two projects to show you how I found out how the power of printed tile is to be able to say something of important about hidden histories and the people's history. And in 2010, I was lucky to go to a place called Berazategui, which is a little town on the outskirts of Buenos Aires in Argentina. I answered an advert in the paper that just said they wanted artists. I applied. I was lucky to go. This is me. This is obviously 8 years ago. It was fantastic. They had 60 artists, mainly from Latin America. There was me and Rachel Silver. I don't know if you know her, but she's from New Zealand. I went there. We had 9 days in this great big building. We were given these 4-metre metal trays and told to do what we like with stuff that had been donated. And this is where I met Saeed Dawkins, who's now an extremely famous street artist, but I met him there. He was a fellow anarchist. We got on really well. I was there, and this is what I did, and this is what I always do. I rock up in a town, and I bring my little bag of tiles. In fact, it's my suitcase. I usually take 1 pair of trousers, a T-shirt, and the rest is tiles. In fact, I'm known, there was a time that I would go to airport security, and they don't weigh you. So my coat would be weighed down with tiles, and I'd be like, oh my God, I used to think that I'd actually bring the planes down because I was carrying so much weight with me. But I used to just go up and I would take tiles, but I'm considerate. I would always lay them out, and I would get to know the people, the local people, and I would ask them, did they like them and did they want them to be included? I would never go and put things up in another country without first asking the people around whether they would want it. So I would do that. And just basically over 9 days, local people came and helped me make this piece. Even the local special school came. I mean, it was beautiful. It was 9 days where anyone could come. The one thing I love about Latin America is they don't give a shit about health and safety. It doesn't exist there. Do you know what I mean? I think health and safety is the kiss of death of creativity myself, So I love to go to these places where they don't care. You can do what you like. It's a joy to work in. And at the end of 9 days, this is what they put on the wall. This is actually their arts and cultural building. And it was amazing. Honestly, they didn't even care whether the work would last or not. They really believed in bringing artists together, making them live together, eat together, work together. And through that, all this dynamic stuff is produced. So this was mine. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just did flying eyeballs because at the time they were a logo I was using. And I like to think of the flying eyeball as a kind of subconscious, bubbling around, watching us, watch what we do. And then I went to Mexico with Saeed. He invited me over there. And in about a week, I did this with their community centre up on a mountaintop in Mexico. So I'd been playing around again with all this idea of bringing my printed tiles and working with the communities to facilitate, to make something. But then I got invited back 2 years later. They said to me, do you want to come back because we're going to do the other side of this building now, Carrie? And would you be prepared to work with some children? And what would you like to work about? And when I'd been there 2 years previously, the thing that had really struck in my mind is this idea of the missing. It always did. When I was in Argentina, I was very conscious of the fact that it wasn't so long ago. It was only in the 70s that large people that would have been like me, radicals, free thinkers, people on the left, would just disappeared. They were murdered, they were taken away. So I suggested that I could do something about this, and they said, yes, we love that. So I went online, I went to the official government site for Berasategui, and I took all the names of the missing, and I put them all on a blue tile, as you can see up in the top. And I printed everybody's name on that tile. I printed the photos of anyone that I could find. And remember, I don't speak Spanish. I literally struggle with English. So, I don't do accents, let alone different languages. I always say I use the universal language of art. So I went there with this stuff. I turned up, I laid it down. These were the group of kids that I was working with and a teacher. This is Sian, who was my assistant for many years. She came with me. Again, we had 9 days to make this in. And just to make it really hard, they gave us plastic tubes. They had a guy on the first day who showed us how to use this adhesive and showed you how it would stick in 4 hours, and it's rubbish. It's the most hardest thing I've ever done because it was just all falling to bits. It was mentioned earlier about Karen Francesca. She's actually making this piece here. She worked with all people from special schools and special needs, but she was with me there. She's a fantastic artist. And so I worked with the kids, and when we were discussing it and we looked at this long plastic tube, the children I was working with said, "Do you know about the Night of the Pencils?" I was like, "No, I'm not even going to attempt to say that, but that's it in Spanish." And I was like, "No, I've never heard of the Night of the Pencils." I didn't know what they were talking about, but in La Plata, which is the next town along from Berazategui, there was a famous incident in '74 where the local art students had been, campaigning and were activists. They went there, they took them. They went to this place and they took these students, they took them away and they tortured them. They literally pulled their fingernails out, they burnt them, they killed them. They literally, I think 5 of them died. It was a horrendous moment in the history of this area. And because I was working with young people, they felt very passionately that they wanted to do something in memory of this. And my friend who I was working with, Bruno, who was one of the people who was the production managers, he said, "I'm from La Plata, let me take you there." So he took me to their arts building. I don't know if you've been to Argentina, but it's very run down in areas. It's absolutely covered now with political posters. My friend calls this visual pollution, and I agree with him. Everywhere you go is just this visual pollution. And he said, "Look, this is the art centre." He said, "Under here is the old mural that we painted many years ago for the students." So me and him spent hours ripping off all that disgusting posters. And we found this old pictures which represented these children that had been murdered, these young people. And so it was very poignant to me that this had been there, now it had gone. And so I went back, and with the students, we decided we would make this object into a big pencil. And luckily for me, those blue squares worked really brilliantly to make this pencil. And so here we are. This is must have used a ton of gaffer tape. I mean, it was a nightmare. And I have to say, I didn't even stick a thing down on this project. I facilitated it. I came with the tiles, I gave my expertise, and I just watched these students with their teacher run with this project and do this. And none of them have ever done mosaics before. And here you can see they're carefully sticking down all the names of all the people that had gone missing from this town. And, I'd taken a list to make sure, and I'd actually duplicated all the names because I was so paranoid about missing someone's name that I duplicated it all. And so I had 2 of them with me. But when I was doing it, one of the students came up to me that I was actually working with, and through a translator, it has to be said, they said to me, "My uncle's not on this list." I was like, "Pardon?" They said, "My uncle, he's not on this list, he disappeared." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then it suddenly dawned on me that I was working with a government official list, and let's face it, when has the government ever told the truth about anything? So I'm working with the official list, but I'm being told by these people that there's names missing. And what was really beautiful is that the community decided they had to do something about it. So the local ceramics person, a tutor, went, they've got the lists for themselves, and these were all painted. Within that 9-day period, they went off and got blue tiles, and they made sure that everybody's name was included in this piece. This is a guy who was a runner and a poet. He'd got a knock at the door. He was an activist. They'd come and they took him away. They put a hood on him and they took him away, and he was murdered. He was beaten up trying to protect someone else in prison, but he was a famous runner and a poet, and I'd taken pictures of him. this is a piece that they'd done in the town that was about him, that had already existed. It hadn't been there when I'd been there 2 years previously, but I think they'd started to make a lot of work. They even have a museum of the missing in Berezatigi, but they hadn't when I was first there. And so you can see this is the end of the pencil. And what we did was we put stars all on it to represent the pencil in the night. And this is that guy's sister who came to visit me, and you can see she's holding the plaque. And I kind of was like, how does this happen? How do they take your brother? It transpired that when the police turned up, the security, they shot the dog dead in front of the family and said, if you don't let us take your son, we'll shoot you all. And so they took him. That's how they do it. That's what happened. I met her. She came. She was the most beautiful woman. And she said to me, you know, it's only projects like this that keep me going. You know, it's because of artists and musicians. There's people who've written all kinds of stuff and made all kinds of work about her brother. She said that was the only thing that really gave her the strength to carry on. And I think that is really important. It's through art and culture that we can continue these stories and make references to things that governments and people in power would much rather that we forget. And so here you can see these are all the names written in mirror of all the young people that were murdered on that tragic night. And here it is, looking very much like a pencil, I think you'll agree. And this is it in place. Unfortunately, a lot of my photos aren't very good because they always install this work when I've long gone. I've got 9 days, I get on a plane, and I still would love to go back to get some decent photos. And so there you can see it. It's the pencil. And actually, everyone who goes on the train passes this piece of work. And so even though you can't read all the names, they're there. And I think that it evokes, it acts as a form of remembrance, and it's there permanently to remind people that all those people went missing. And so that was 2012, but this is last year. So because of that kind of work, I was invited to New Art Street Art Festival. New Art is a fantastic festival that's been going for 17 years, the longest ever street art festival, but they're engaged in critical thinking, and most importantly, they're engaged in producing street art that's supposed to reflect the communities that it's in, it's supposed to give civic agency, it's supposed to make a difference. So they brought me up. They said to me, do you want to do a piece in Aberdeen? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And they said, well, why don't you come to our archives, because we have some of the best archives in the whole of United Kingdom. And I said, yeah, that's great. So they took me there. And it was dreadful, because it's not even in English. It's just all old books with writing. And I realised when I got there that it was the most... I couldn't really work with any of it, but they got a nice photo for their local paper. The guy that worked there, and it's always, making connections with the people, he asked me, did I know about the witch hunts? And I was like, no, but I think that's something I'd like to know about. And he actually gave me some information that had been written, taken from the archives, and it was the most condensed, it was the most accurate information about those who'd been involved in the witch hunts in the 15th century, in 1597, I think it is. So they gave me this information, and I went home. And when I was up there, when I went for this little visit, I thought, I'll stick some tiles up just to let people know that I've been, because I do have a tendency to stick tiles up wherever I go. And the really nice thing is that when I came back to install the work, people had joined in. Your patriarchy is fading. So, I think this is what I mean. In Aberdeen, they're encouraging local people to become creative. Because when you do street art things, a lot of it is about people going and putting their brand, putting their logo, but that doesn't interest me. My interest is going into communities and facilitating them and making art that I think represents things that need to be talked about. So they offered me this space, and I was like, yes, I want this space. I don't know if you know Aberdeen, but it's all granite city. And one of the things you're not allowed to do is you are not allowed to touch the granite city. You can't put anything on the granite, but they have all these old windows and doors that have been freeze-blocked in. And I said, I love this. And the reason is you see where it says St Nicholas Lane, Opposite this is St. Nicholas's Cur, the church. This was the church where they'd just recently discovered a circle in the floor where they'd been holding the witches. This is the basement where they used to up to a year hold women chained. And so for me, it was like so site-specific that I thought, I've got to do it here. I've got to work here. But obviously there wasn't permission for this. So I'm always the person where they go, just do it, and then we'll see. So everybody else had permission to put up their street art except me. I was banking on the fact that once it was up there, they'd have to take a hammer and chisel to remove it. And woe betide them if they tried to chisel down the names of all the witches that they'd murdered. So this was the spot that I was given. And when I was staying there, I stayed in this fabulous hotel, Carlamite, I think. I can't quite pronounce it. But these were the windows. And when I was there, I was looking at the stained glass windows, and I thought, wow, I wonder if I can recreate that in tile. Because one of the things is, you don't actually really get paid to do street art festivals. I know it seems by my social media that I'm all over the place, but most of it is done for love and not for money. This one didn't really have a budget, so I was like, I think I want to reduce the mosaicing I do and try and concentrate on the print. So I'm now much more interested in, trying to make what I consider a ceramic collage using tiles. So this is my front room, and this was me working it all out. The first piece was about the witches. It was called We Are the Witches, and it contained as much information as I could. It named every person that had been accused or had been killed as a witch, told you all about the history of it. And then the other piece was Trailblazing Women of Aberdeen that you should know about. Because this was, this is the year of 100 years of rich women getting the vote, okay, which is something that you always have to remember, because they love saying it's 100 years since women got the vote. Well, actually, it's 100 years since women over 30 who had property had the vote. And so I think it's really important that even that kind of history, because it was the same year that working class men got the vote, but nobody really cares about that. So I wanted to be able to bring all this information to life and make a permanent reminder of this. And I also wanted to do a bit of mosaic, and when I was there I thought, I'll use a bit of Gaelic, that would be nice. And I got, because I was all the time talking to people there, and they said, well, that'd be lovely, Carrie, but we don't speak Gaelic, we speak Doric. I'm like, okay, all right, okay. And so I said, well, let's write some in Doric. And I was working with some really amazing women up there. And they said, oh, have you ever heard of Galasquens? And I'm like, no. And they said, it means ballsy women. I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm going to put up there then. So, and then there was a whole conversation because nobody actually knew how you spelt it. There's actually different ways of spelling this in different parts of Scotland. And then you get into all that kind of stuff about language. But I just thought ballsy women needs to be up there. So, and this is my friend Karen, who again came to help me make it. And then I wrote in Mark, you would have seen him, ATM. The thing is me, Karen and Mark, who's ATM, have actually, I went and did my degree, my university degree with Karen, and Mark is her brother. And between us, we are the people that set up Living Space Art, the Treatment Rooms Collective, have all gone on to do street art, but really we're a group of friends who've worked together for 25 years. And Mark, being a brilliant draftsperson, I got him in because I was also commissioned by Amnesty International to make a piece about human rights defenders. And again, because of the year of it being the suffrage, I decided to make a piece that was so, when you think about suffragettes, this is what you would think about, visually. Just to make sure that I was worked to death, New Art said to me, can you do a community project? Because we know how good you are. And I was like, okay, you get them there to come up with 12 unsung heroes. You work with young people, tell them to give us 12 unsung heroes. I'll make plaques, I'll bring them up, we'll run a workshop, people can decorate them, we'll put them on the wall. And they said, great. And so this woman, Angela, went off to run this workshop, and she said she was working with these kids, and they're like, oh, this boring miss, I can't think of anyone. And it's like, you must, you don't understand, this is a great opportunity for you to put forward. And this young boy said, all right, I like Toxic Effects, which was a punk band from the 90s. And he said, well, I want to do them. And okay, so that's fine. And so while I was doing this, because of social media, I would be putting up my information on my social media. As you can see, Carrie's doing this work, and I put this up. But then within about 20 minutes, I got a message from the guy saying, oh, that's great, but you've got all the wrong names, which is often what happens, because I'm not doing work where I've worked with a historian for 3 weeks to make sure this is all correct. I'm literally making it, taking it up there, and it's happening very quick, which is the nature of street art. But clearly, things were going wrong. I mean, I struggled understanding his emails, if I'm honest. I had to have them translated to me. But during this time, this is my kiln. This is who I worked with, Aberdeen inspired and New Art Aberdeen. My kiln broke. Every time I have to do something really important, my kiln seems to break. And so I was getting all in fluster because I had all these 3 simultaneous projects to do. So then I had to go use Linda's kiln. My friend Linda, I'm like, oh, you've got to help me, my kiln. It's like, So I went to use Linda's, and then hers didn't quite work, and everything went wrong. And unbelievably, when I rocked up in Aberdeen, because someone had seen me on social media say my kiln's broken, this woman said, it's all right, I've got a kiln, I run a pottery craft place, you come use my kiln. So we did. I had to go and have all this stuff changed and made. But that again is the nature of facilitating communities. It becomes a community project, and that's what I love about it, is that people become involved in the process, and we're all working together, and the energy is so good. And so I ran this project for the one I was telling you about, the Unsung Heroes, where we had 5 hours. That's all we had, 5 hours in a college to decorate these plaques. Had 2 fantastic mosaicists come help me. Can't remember their names, but they were lovely. Sheila and Marion, who I think are from BAMM, but they came to help me. We spent 5 days. It was great because they came up. Fit Light apparently is also Doric, or, is a local thing that they like. We made all these beautiful pieces. And we made these great signs that said Everyday Heroes, which, if you think about it, this is just a 5-hour project. That's all I had, was 5 hours with the community, and the next day to install these pieces. And I left it very much for them to decide where these pieces go. We did it very democratically, laid it down on a street, worked out where everything should go. And then we put them up. Like this kid, he decided on this personal plaque. He'd designed it. It's not a great picture, but you can see he'd made little thistles going around the edge, which was really sweet. And this is what it looked like. Everyday Heroes. Really, it really captured the imagination of everybody there, because it was they came. This is the guy that's so funny, because he is the singer in that punk band who came. And you can see he gave him a copy of his album, which was only 100 ever made. In all the press, they made that little kid cover up the fuck. So in all the press, he had to have Mad As. But I said, no, get your fingers out of the way. I'm an artist, your rules don't apply. And it was the thing that, literally at the Street Art Festival, it was the thing that went on the front of the local paper. One thing to be said, though, is that we didn't actually get permission for that wall either. And the guy really didn't like it, because it was a music shop where they used grates, and they put them on the side of this wall, and they've insisted that this is all removed. And so now I have to remake those plaques. They're going to have to redo it, and it's going somewhere else. And I didn't want to make a fuss about it or complain about it, because New Art is working in Aberdeen with local people, and we didn't want them to think that if they donated walls, they wouldn't be able to not. We didn't want to create any animosity between anyone there, because it's an ongoing project. And so I don't mind, it's going to exist again. That's coming down, and it's going up somewhere else. But because it was a it was a young person's led thing, and it was done very quickly, and I'm dyslexic, I never noticed that we spelt everything wrong, including even that footballer who's really famous, who I can't remember who he is. But I managed to, it's all spelt wrong. But again, this lovely sign writer came. She came at 7 in the morning before she went to work, and she carefully changed everything. I mean, we spelt her name wrong, Caroline Thomas, which is, but this was a teacher. This was one of the people said, can I just tell you, can we just do it for my teacher who's died of cancer, who was lovely, who dedicated her whole life, So it's a simple thing, but in a way it represents all teachers. It represents everyday heroes, unsung heroes, the people that do things in their community all the time that don't really get mentioned. So I'm quite pleased in a way that they're removing it, 'cause now it'll have to be spelt right. And also with my own work, I told you one of the pieces was about the suffragettes. Now, Caroline Phillips is one of the most important suffragettes for the whole of the North and East, up north. She's a hugely important figure. And I was working with Sarah Peterson, who's actually works in the university and is the leading scholar on suffragettes in Scotland. And I'd sent her a picture saying, do you like it? And she said, yes, it looks great. Though Caroline, it wasn't her who changed the flags at Balmoral, and I'm sure she didn't smash any windows. And so it's like, again, oh, God, I've got my information wrong. So I had to quickly refire it, redo it, come back. And the funny thing is about Caroline Phillips is that they'd spent 3 years negotiating to put a blue plaque up, but couldn't because it would have to have gone up on the granite. So 3 years they'd been trying to get her a blue plaque, but I came along and shoved her up there anyway. And now, I think it's fantastic because in a way that street art and what I did circumnavigated that, and I managed to bring that all to life and to tell this important story, because I think it's really important that everyone realises that women didn't just get the vote, they had to fight for it. And this is my friend Karen helping me to put it up. Here we are, putting them up in this place, battling against the weather, I have to say. Here's Sheila, who came and helped. It was fantastic. There's a whole load of volunteers. There were 40 volunteers that helped up in Aberdeen that makes the whole job possible. And so here is the piece that was done for Amnesty. I haven't got a close-up, but low down are all everyday human rights defenders from Aberdeen, women that were, contemporary women that were doing things now, and then that's balanced against obviously from the suffragettes of the past. And this is what it looks like, the piece now. And I think it's probably the piece I'm most proud of, because I really do think that it looks good in that situation. It's powerful. It was made to be all green and purple and cream, obviously, because of the colours of the suffragettes. And it's great because people can get up close and they can read it and they can see it. And one of the great things is someone told me that they saw someone, and at the top of it, I don't know if you saw, but at the top there it says, "We are the granddaughters of all the witches you weren't able to burn." And there was a woman there, and she looked at the top, and she laughed, and she went, laughed at that. And then her eye level came down, and then she was looking at the list of names, and she went, "That's my name. That's my name." And so if you think about how, and you were to go to somewhere like Aberdeen, lots of people have the same names. And so in a way, I think it's fantastic that so many people will look at this wall and they will actually see their name and realise that their relatives were burnt as witches, which basically meant you were a woman of a certain age who had an opinion. Just to be clear on that. I'd have been burnt. People have always said that I was probably a witch in a former life. Probably was. I think I'm a witch in this life. But anyway. So yes, like I said, I think it's probably one of the pieces I'm most proud of. And now every week they have street art festivals that go around Aberdeen, that walk all the way around to show them the street art, and in the same way it encourages people to navigate through the city in ways they wouldn't normally do, to discover hidden histories and to use art as a way of encouraging us to get into that debate and to talk about things and to remember things. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this type of work, because I think with the use of print and using it in a very narrative way, in telling these stories, is a very potent, powerful way to take the power of mosaic, the power of ceramic, and the power of people's stories and making it permanent. So, thank you.